My parents called my wedding a disgrace. That was the word my mother used. Her lips pressed tight, her voice like glass shattering across the room. A disgrace. And my father, standing beside her, didn't correct her. He only looked at me as if I were a stranger. I was 70 years old, and after decades of living by their rules, by society's rules, I had chosen love again. Not quiet widowhood, not a rocking chair by the window, not invisibility. Love. I thought they would be happy for me, relieved that I'd found joy after burying my husband. Instead, they turned my happiest day into an ambush. The scene is burned into my memory. I was in the church hall, arranging the flowers with my granddaughter when they arrived early. My mother didn't even greet me. She scanned the room, her eyes darting over the tablecloths, the candles, the bouquets I had so carefully chosen. Then she said it. "This is a disgrace." Her voice carried. Guests turned their heads. My fiancé's children stiffened beside him. My own son shifted uncomfortably, his wife whispering in his ear. I tried to steady myself, gripping the back of a chair. Disgrace? What about this is disgraceful? You, at your age, parading around in white. My father muttered. Marrying again, as if your first vows meant nothing. What will people think? The words cut deeper than I care to admit. I had cared for my husband through cancer, held his hand through his last breath. I had been loyal to our marriage until the end. How dare they? How dare they reduce my life, my choices, to gossip and shame? For a moment, I wanted to shrink, to disappear under their judgment. But then a different thought took hold. Why should I apologize for still being alive? For still having a heart that beats, a soul that wants, a hand that reaches for warmth in the night? I looked them in the eye and asked, how could my own parents wish me loneliness after everything I've survived? They had no answer, only silence. What they didn't know was that I had already prepared for this moment, for the whispers, for the judgment, for the betrayal disguised as concern. They thought they had the power to humiliate me, to ruin my day. But the truth was, they had underestimated me my whole life. And that day, they would finally learn just how wrong they were. But to understand how it all unfolded, the words spoken, the faces revealed, and the choice I made, you need to know how it began. I was 20 when I married my first husband, Walter. He was my first love, my true partner. We built a home together, raised 2 children, worked side by side. When cancer came for him, it came like a thief in the night, and I stayed until his last breath. For years after, I wore black without even meaning to. Life felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down on the world. My parents praised my grief. That sounds strange, doesn't it? But it's the truth. They praised me for not remarrying, for honoring Walter's memory, as if widowhood was a permanent badge I was meant to wear. When I told my mother, after 5 years, that I was going on a dinner date, she pursed her lips and said, "At your age." At your age. Those 3 words carried more venom than any insult. I swallowed them then, choosing silence. But silence is a kind of poison, too. It seeps into your bones until you almost start believing it. Almost. Then I met Gregory. He was 68, a widower himself. A retired professor who loved books the way Walter had loved fishing. We met at the library, both reaching for the same worn copy of Anna Karenina. He laughed when our hands touched. I didn't. My hands trembled because it had been so long since anyone had made me laugh without trying. Months turned into a year into 2. He was gentle, thoughtful, never rushed me. When he proposed, he did it quietly in my kitchen, while I was ladling soup. "Life's too short to keep eating alone," he said, holding out a simple gold band. I laughed until I cried, and then I said yes. I told my parents, expecting hesitation but not cruelty. Instead, my mother spat out the word that would echo for months: disgrace. The weeks before the wedding were a nightmare. I would call my daughter, hoping for support, and hear hesitation in her voice. "Mom, maybe they just need time. It's a big adjustment." My son avoided the subject altogether, more concerned with what the neighbors would think. "It's unusual," he said once, as if I were announcing I was moving to the moon. Even my grandchildren, usually my greatest comfort, seemed caught in the crossfire. My granddaughter whispered once, "Grandma, why are they so mad at you?" I had no answer that didn't sound cruel. So I planned my wedding quietly, determinedly. I chose my dress, not white, but a soft ivory with lace sleeves like my grandmother's Sunday dresses. I booked the church hall, arranged the flowers, ordered a cake with strawberries. I told myself this was my chance to celebrate, to be joyful again. But betrayal has a way of creeping in where love should be. The morning of the ceremony, my parents arrived before anyone else. They didn't smile, didn't hug me. They stood in the doorway like inspectors. "We're not staying," my mother announced. "We just wanted you to know how deeply ashamed we are. Your first husband would roll in his grave." I felt my knees go weak. My granddaughter clutched my hand. Guests were arriving, whispers starting to stir. "Why come at all?" I asked. My voice shook, but my eyes didn't leave theirs. "To make it clear where we stand," my father said. "This is not a union we can support." They turned and left before the music even began. I married Gregory anyway. I walked down that aisle with my head high, even as whispers followed me like shadows. But I will tell you this: the betrayal of family cuts deeper than the judgment of strangers. That night, when the reception was over and the guests had gone, I sat in bed beside my new husband and cried, not because of doubt, but because of fury. How could my own parents at their age still treat me like a child? How could they wish me loneliness in the name of appearances? I didn't know it then, but that wedding was only the beginning. Their cruelty wasn't about morality. It was about control. And soon, I would discover just how far they were willing to go to keep it. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived by certified mail. Not from them directly, from their lawyer. It accused me of reckless behavior, questioned my mental capacity, and hinted at family concern for my well-being. The last page listed interim measures they intended to request: supervised access to my accounts, a capacity evaluation, a temporary guardian. I stared at those words until the page blurred. They weren't just shaming me. They were trying to take my life apart piece by piece. The will Walter and I had built, the savings, the house, the careful nest egg, suddenly felt fragile. If they could convince my children that I was unfit, if they could stir enough doubt, everything I had worked for could be taken from my hands under the banner of protection. I sat in my kitchen that night, the letter trembling in my hand, and asked the question that had haunted me since the wedding. How could my own parents do this to me? The answer, I realized, was simple. Because I had always let them. And for the first time in 70 years, I decided I would not let them anymore. Gregory made tea and listened. He didn't interrupt while I read the letter out loud, every careful, condescending clause. When I finished, he set the cup down and took my hands. "We'll answer this," he said, "not with anger, with preparation." Preparation. The word steadied me. He had seen something like this before. His late wife's siblings had tried to contest her estate, whispering that grief made him impulsive. He knew attorneys who specialized in elder law. He knew how guardianship petitions worked and how to dismantle malicious ones. We started with my house. I moved it into a living trust in my name, with a successor trustee I chose, my granddaughter Lila, whose mind is quick and whose loyalty is quiet, not loud and performative. Next came the accounts. We created a list, checked beneficiaries, updated passwords, placed code words on file at the bank. Then I made a doctor's appointment, not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted a clean, undeniable report. Dr. Chen ran the cognitive tests methodically. She asked me to draw a clock, list animals, repeat phrases, remember 3 words. I named the animals in alphabetical order and asked if I could add exotic ones too. She smiled and wrote, "Normal cognition, no impairment," and she did not hesitate. We hired Miriam Katz to answer the letter. Miriam had steel in her spine and gentleness in her voice. She wrote back with citations in case law, but the line that mattered most was simple. "Any ex parte attempt to control my client's property or decision-making will be met with immediate relief in court and a petition for fees. In other words, try it, and you will pay." For a while, there was silence. My mother is a strategist. She never moves unless she thinks she can win. My father follows her lead, a stern silhouette beside her. I knew the quiet meant they were recalculating. My children were not quiet. My son, Michael, called to check in. He had never used that phrase in his life. He has a way of wrapping worry in criticism, like a gift in barbed wire. "Mom, nobody is trying to hurt you," he said. "We just want to be sure you're thinking clearly. You've been through a lot." "Thinking clearly," I repeated. "Is that what they told you?" "They didn't tell me anything," he said too quickly. "I'm just concerned." "Are you concerned about me?" I asked. "Or about what the neighbors will think if there's a scene?" He didn't answer. The silence told the truth. My daughter, Ruth, has her father's kindness and my mother's fear of conflict. She cried when I told her about the letter. "I don't agree with them," she said, "but I don't know how to stop them." I didn't ask her to. people cannot be made brave on command. I went to church the next Sunday. I expected whispers. I got stares. The pastor avoided my pew. After the final hymn, one of the women stepped into my path. "You must understand," she said. "Your parents are pillars here. They only want what's best." I looked at her hands, folded like a photograph of piety. "If what's best is taking a woman's life away because it makes you uncomfortable," I said, "then I pity your definition of good." I left before coffee hour. At home, Gregory was on the phone with our neighbor, Leo. Quiet, careful Leo, who spends more time on his porch than in his house. He had recorded something on his door camera. My mother, my father, and my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, on my porch while I was at church. Vanessa held a folder and a small device that looked like a lockpick. They spoke in low voices. Vanessa produced a key. The three of them went inside. I felt the sting before the breath. Vanessa has always been polished. I used to think her composure was kindness. It was discipline. And now I understood who had been whispering legal strategies into my parents' ears. We called the police, not to arrest them, but to document the trespass. The officer was polite and weary. "Family disputes," he said, "are the worst kind of burglary. Everyone thinks the house is theirs." After he left, I walked through my rooms. Nothing was broken. Nothing obvious was missing. But drawers had been opened and closed again. A file cabinet hung slightly ajar. In my sewing room, the top drawer was empty. I kept an old checkbook there, the one Walter and I used the first year we were married, more sentiment than utility. It was gone. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I was 20 again, standing in a tiny apartment balancing a checkbook with a pencil. Walter always joked he'd marry me twice just for my neat columns of numbers. I opened my eyes and felt the old heat rise. They had not only entered my home, they had taken my history. Miriam wanted a private investigator. "You need more than indignation," she said. "You need a timeline." So, we hired Cole Harper, a man built like a question mark, always leaning forward. He found things fast. A credit inquiry in my name I hadn't requested. A line of credit application pending at a bank across town. A whisper of a rumor at church that I couldn't manage my bills. He also found the tender part I didn't expect. He found out my father had been at a neurologist 2 months before my wedding. Early signs. The kind of thing families avoid naming until the word is too literal to ignore. Mild cognitive impairment. It explained the way he forgot names mid-sentence, the way rage replaced reason at odd moments. It did not excuse what they had done, but it colored the edges. I held that knowledge quietly as Cole worked. He obtained a copy of the credit application. The signature was mine, except it wasn't. Someone had traced it from a card I'd signed years ago, and my mother had saved for her scrapbook. The application listed my income, my address, my birth date. It also listed a secondary contact in case of emergency, Vanessa. I felt a calm I didn't trust. Sometimes fury sharpens you, refines you to a single point. I called my son. "I need you to come over," I said. "Bring Vanessa." "We're busy," he said. This is about my house, I replied, and it's about the law. They came. Vanessa was careful with her face, giving nothing away. I laid the application on the table. Explain, I said. Vanessa looked at Michael. I don't know what this is, she said evenly. It's a crime, I said, and it has your number on it. Michael's ears went red. Mom, you're overreacting. We're trying to make sure you're safe. Scammers target people your age. Do scammers use my daughter-in-law's phone as a contact? I asked. He stared at the paper, then at Vanessa. She didn't blink. Your mother is confused, she said, her voice patient. She's been under stress. She thinks everyone is against her. I had lived with gaslighting before. I had learned its grammar. I pushed the second page across the table. Leo's door camera still, printed from the police report. 3 figures on my porch. Vanessa's hand on the key. The patience drained from her face. We came to check on things, she said. Your mother forgets to lock doors. Did we steal anything? Michael demanded. Did we? Because if not, this is just you making a fuss. I thought of the checkbook, the pencil columns, Walter's voice teasing and tender. Yes, I said. You did. What? A pen? He rolled his eyes. A piece of my life, I said. And you're not welcome in it until you remember how to respect it. They left in a storm of slammed doors and half-formed retorts. I went to my room and closed my own door quietly. There is a power in closing something gently that another person tried to break. Miriam filed a reply to the guardianship threat, attaching the doctor's report, the police report, and Cole's findings. She requested a restraining order that didn't keep my parents away. For that, my heart wasn't ready, but kept Vanessa away from anything with my name on it. The judge signed it without a hearing. He had seen enough women robbed with the language of care. My parents responded in the only way they understood. They tried to flood the field. My mother called people one after another, telling them I was not myself, that Gregory had isolated me. She pulled old stories from my childhood, the time I lost a mitten, the time I skipped a dance because I didn't have the right shoes, and held them up as proof that I had always been irresponsible. The congregation murmured. Some believed her. Some looked at me and looked away. Even doubt from a distance can bruise. Gregory suggested we go away for a week. Not to hide, to breathe. We drove to the coast and stayed in a small inn with thin walls and honest coffee. We walked in the mornings, wrapped in scarves. We made lists in the afternoons. Simple things, the trees changing, the book he wanted to read to me, the lemon tart we split with 2 forks. In the evenings, we talked about what we wanted our life to be, not just what we wanted to stop. On the 4th day, Miriam called. There's a hearing, she said. Your parents filed an emergency petition 2 days from now. Emergency, I repeated. What's the emergency? That you had the audacity to live, Miriam said dryly. Come home. Rest. We'll be ready. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. My parents sat on one side with their lawyer, a man who radiated apology while sharpening knives. We sat on the other with Miriam, who radiated warmth while building walls. The judge looked tired. He asked my mother to speak. She stood, spine straight. "My daughter is not well," she said. "She's being influenced. She's always been easily swayed." "By love?" Miriam asked. "By happiness?" "By foolishness," my mother snapped, then composed her face again. "She is signing documents she doesn't understand. She is alienating family." Miriam rose and handed the judge a file. "Medical assessment," she said. "Police report. Video still. Credit application with a forged signature. Restriction order against the daughter-in-law who filed it." My mother took a breath, but her lawyer put a hand on her sleeve. "Your Honor," he said, "families are complicated. Emotions are high. We simply ask for oversight." "By whom?" the judge asked. The lawyer nodded toward my parents. The judge looked at my father, who sat staring at his hands. "Sir," he asked, "do you believe your daughter cannot manage her affairs?" My father lifted his head as if from deep water. "I believe my wife knows best," he said slowly. "What do you believe?" the judge asked, turning to me. "About your capacity?" "I believe grief made me quiet," I said, "and age made other people comfortable telling me what my life should be. I am done being quiet, and I am not confused." He studied my face, then Gregory's, then my parents. "Petition denied," he said. "Any further attempts to control this woman without cause will result in sanctions. Ma'am, if you need the court's help for your own protection, it is yours." We walked out into winter sun that felt like spring. Gregory squeezed my hand. "One battle," he said. "The war did not end. It changed shape." Without the courts, my mother moved to the court of opinion, where she had always thrived. She called a family meeting for my parents' 68th anniversary. She reserved the church hall, the same one she had walked into to call my wedding a disgrace. The invitation said celebration and testimony. I knew what testimony meant in her mouth. It meant a script written long ago in which my part was silence. I went, not out of obligation, out of resolve. I wore a blue dress, Walter's favorite color, and a scarf Gregory bought me in a seaside town. My daughter met me at the door. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. Her eyes were swollen. I kissed her cheek. The hall was full of faces that had studied me my whole life. My mother stood at the front with a microphone. My father sat behind her, his gaze drifting. Vanessa hovered at the edge, angry even when she smiled. Michael stood beside her, a solid shape of denial. My mother began gently. "Memory is a skilled liar when it dresses like kindness." She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke of sacrifice, of tradition, of keeping families right. Then she turned to me. "Sometimes," she said, "people we love forget who they are. They are led astray. They make choices that shame their history. We must be brave enough to intervene." I walked to the front before she could say my name like a diagnosis. Bravery, I said into the second microphone, is not stealing a woman's keys to her own life. It is letting her open her door. A murmur ran through the hall. My mother's jaw set. You see, she said, how unstable she's become. I could have argued, could have pleaded. Instead, I turned to the screen they had set up to show photos of their long marriage. Cole had helped me prepare a different slideshow. We had placed a small USB device into the laptop earlier when the tech volunteer wasn't looking. A soft click, and the sequence changed. The first image was the door camera still of my porch. Then the credit application with my forged signature. Then a letter from the bank confirming the line of credit was denied after my report. Then my cognitive evaluation, the words no impairment in clean clinical ink. Then a final image, my old checkbook, found by Cole in a box in Vanessa's car trunk after the judge's order allowed a search related to the fraud complaint. Lined columns under the name Mrs. Walter Pierce. Neat as promise. The room went very still. Silence is sometimes more honest than noise. Vanessa moved first. This is harassment, she said loudly. You can't invade privacy like this. You invaded mine, I said. And my home. And my trust. Michael's face drained of color. You told me you were helping, he hissed at her. You said Mom was being scammed. She is being scammed, Vanessa snapped. By him. She pointed at Gregory, as if love were a con man. They're going to run off with her money and we'll be stuck cleaning up the mess. Stuck with what? I asked. With a woman who feeds your children on Sundays? With a grandmother you taught to be ashamed of joy? My mother regained her footing. We are trying to protect you, she said, voice trembling with the effort of staying smooth. From what? I asked. From a second chance? I looked at my father. His hand shook. When he spoke, his old voice returned for a moment. Enough, he said. He wasn't speaking to me. He was speaking to the storm my mother had summoned. Enough! My mother stared at him as if he had spoken treason. Then she looked at me, and for a second I saw the girl she had been, terrified of being left behind by happiness that didn't include her. Perhaps that had always been the point. If I was alone, I belonged to her. I did not gloat. I did not call her names. I said something simpler. I love you, I said, but I will not let you run my life. Not anymore. I handed the microphone back and walked toward the exit. People shifted to let me through. A quiet corridor. Some reached for my hand. Some looked down. Ruth walked beside me. Gregory waited at the door and opened it like a promise. The next morning, Michael came over alone. He stood on my porch where the camera had captured his wife with the key. He held nothing in his hands. I'm sorry, he said when I let him in. I wanted to believe her because it meant I didn't have to admit I was wrong. About what? I asked. About who you are, he said. I thought old meant fragile. I thought widow meant finished. I thought my job was to make choices for you, the way you did for me when I was little. I forgot that you were always teaching me how to stand. not how to hold you up." He cried, and I held him. The hug did not erase everything, but it loosened a knot that had kept my heart in a fist. He moved out of the house he shared with Vanessa 2 weeks later. I did not celebrate. Marriage is an ocean I won't pretend to map, but I stopped setting a place for both of them at Sunday dinner. My mother retreated, licking the wounds of a public plan undone. She still sent letters, sometimes full of scripture, sometimes full of silence. I answered some, I ignored some. I learned that love can exist at a distance without rotting. My father's diagnosis hardened into a word on paper the spring the lilacs bloomed. I went with him to the appointment. My mother stared at the floor. I held his hand, small and as the hands that had once lifted me out of bathwater when I was little. "Do you know who she is?" the doctor asked him gently. He looked at me with a concentration that hurt to watch. "My daughter," he said, "the stubborn one." I laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes," I said, "the stubborn one." I brought him lemon bars the next week, his favorite. He called me Margaret, the name of his sister. I didn't correct him. He held the plate and smiled like a boy. I visited when I could. I did not visit when my mother left voicemail after voicemail telling me I owed it to her. I owed him my presence. I did not owe her my obedience. Gregory and I built a life that was not grand, but was extremely ours. We planted tomatoes. We learned to share blankets like a language. We argued about books and made up over soup. I kept a small notebook by my bed and wrote one good thing each night, the way Walter and I had once listed bills paid, columns of gratitude that balanced a ledger I could not see. We started something else, too, with Miriam's help. After court, a woman had pressed a note into my hand in the hallway. "My son is trying to take my house," it said. "I don't know what to do." I called her. As we spoke, I heard 1,000 women's voices. So, we created the Second Bloom Fund, a small pot at first. Grant money for evaluations, legal consultations, lock changes, boxes for documents, bus fare to courts. Women arrived at my kitchen table with manila folders and shaking hands. We drank tea and wrote lists together. Preparation, I told them. Not panic. Preparation. The church hall changed too. The pastor called me into his office one afternoon. He looked tired, like the judge had. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I let your mother's voice become this church's voice." "Then let it become yours again," I said. And he did, in small ways. He visited my father. He preached a sermon about honoring elders by believing them when they say what they want. He allowed the ladies' group to host one of our fund's clinics, and he baked a sheet cake himself, badly frosted but sweet. I found my old checkbook one evening while I was sorting files for a woman we were helping. Cole had handed it to me months before. I hadn't opened it. I traced the columns: rent, utilities, groceries. Walter's handwriting on the margin, a small heart. I set it next to the new ledger Miriam had me keep for the fund. Names, dollars, outcomes. The way 2 lives can rhyme across decades made my chest ache and swell at once. On our first anniversary, Gregory and I decided to renew our vows, not out of habit, but as a kind of stubborn joy. We rented the botanical garden greenhouse in late autumn, warm as summer inside, glass beaded with condensation that made the world outside look like a dream. We invited everyone, even my parents. I did not expect my mother to come. She arrived 10 minutes before the music started, a winter coat over a black dress. She stood in the doorway, not moving forward, as if the threshold were a coastline she could not cross. My father clutched her sleeve, bewildered by the jungle of ferns. I walked to them. "You are welcome," I said. My mother's eyes searched my face for pity, for contempt, for a fight she could win. She found none. "I don't approve," she said, a reflex. "I know," I replied. "You don't have to. You only have to not destroy what you don't understand." She nodded once, a small, brittle movement. "He doesn't remember," she whispered, glancing at my father. "Then let him enjoy the music," I said. We seated them near the back on the aisle in case my father grew restless. He didn't. He watched the light on the leaves, and he hummed to a song he must have known once. Lila read a poem. Ruth squeezed my hand. Michael stood, and voice shaking, offered a toast that was really an apology. "To my mother," he said, "who taught me that the bravest thing a person can do is choose happiness publicly." When it was my turn, I spoke to Gregory, but I spoke to others too. "I was told joy after grief was a betrayal," I said. "I was told love had an expiration date written in everyone else's opinions. I believe now that love is what wakes us up when shame tells us to sleep." After the ceremony, my mother approached me alone. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "To do what?" I asked. "To be your mother when you don't need me to be the boss." I could have said 1,000 things. I said only the one that left the most room. Then be my mother who sits and tells me a story I haven't heard. We sat among the ferns, two women the world would describe as old, and she told me about her own wedding day, the way her mother had hissed that her dress made her look fast, the way she had smiled anyway because my father had slipped her a note that said, "You look like a beginning." She had kept that note in her Bible for 68 years and weaponized pain instead of bearing it. She cried quietly, and I did not tell her to stop. When they left, my father kissed my cheek, stiffly, like a man performing a remembered ritual. "Proud," he said. "Proud my daughter learned to be stubborn for the right things." On the way home, under a sky that held the last blue of the day like a cup, Gregory took my hand on the console. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like a woman who has finally been the author of her own life for more than a page," I said. He laughed, and the sound warmed the car. The months that followed were not a montage in soft light. There were ugly moments, phone calls that reopened old wounds, letters I tore up and then taped back together to read carefully for anything true. My mother slipped sometimes and twice tried to call Miriam directly to discuss arrangements. Miriam, unflappable, told her there were no arrangements to discuss. My father had a bad spell in late winter. We spent 3 nights in a hospital room with a curtain that never closed right. listening to machines beep their slow metronome. He called me teacher and asked when the bell would ring. I told him soon and rubbed his hands until he slept. Vanessa served papers for a divorce she had never wanted. My son signed them with a face I couldn't read. He began therapy. He started bringing the children over alone. We baked cookies and didn't speak of custody schedules. He asked me one day if the fund needed a website, and I almost said no out of habit, then said yes, because people continue to grow if you let them. The fund grew. Women came from church basements, from senior centers, from bus stops and whisper chains. We helped one whose nephew had moved in temporarily and changed the locks. We helped another whose daughter had taken her debit card and called it consolidation. We helped a third who was more like me than I wanted to admit, forced to defend joy with paperwork. We talked about money like we were talking about recipes, practical and unashamed. In early spring, I took down the lace sleeves of my wedding dress and turned them into curtains for the kitchen. Bold, Gregory teased. And I said yes. And we laughed like the young people commercials think they've patented. On the anniversary of my first husband's death, I went to the cemetery with fresh flowers and a note. The note said, "Thank you for the years that taught me loyalty. They prepared me for this love, too." I stood there and felt no betrayal in my heart. It felt like a house with 2 rooms, both occupied by gratitude. I still receive invitations I do not accept and judgments I do not counter. I have learned the strange luxury of leaving an accusation unanswered. Not every gavel that bangs deserves a courtroom, but some did. 3 months after the vow renewal, Vanessa's fraud case matured out of hesitation into consequence. The district attorney accepted the charges. I sat outside the courtroom while she pled to a lesser offense and agreed to perform community service at a shelter that protects women from financial abuse. I did not ask for that placement. Life has a sense of irony when you surrender your need to orchestrate it. After, she approached me in the hallway, flanked by a public defender who looked 17. "I hate you," she said, but the heat had gone out of the words. "I don't hate you," I said. "I hate what you taught my son to accept." She looked at the floor tiles. "You'll never forgive me." "That's not a trophy you get to hold," I said softly. "Forgiveness is my furniture. I rearrange it when I want." She didn't look up. She nodded once, as if she understood the shape of her own absence in our lives. Summer came with tomatoes and court dates in other people's lives that I attended as a quiet friend. The pastor asked me to speak at a luncheon titled Autonomy and Aging. I began with the sentence my mother used like a knife and turned it into a tool. "My parents called my wedding a disgrace," said me. "They didn't expect what would happen next, and neither did I. I expected to be sad forever. Instead, I learned the discipline of joy." After, a woman with a cane leaned in and whispered, "I got married again at 75. My son didn't come to the ceremony. He hasn't called in 2 years. I thought I was alone." I took her hand and wrote my phone number on a napkin. Community often begins in the margins of napkins. Autumn returned. My father forgot my name more often than not. He remembered the Navy song from his youth and sang it to a rhythm only he could hear. My mother asked me once if I wanted to look through her boxes, just in case. I went to the attic and opened a trunk. On top of a pile of old linens lay a yellowing envelope addressed to me in my father's hand, dated the day I married Walter. I opened it carefully. Inside was a note. You look like a beginning. I brought it downstairs and laid it between us. My mother touched the paper with a fingertip and drew back like it burned. Perhaps it did. When he died in late November, the pastor asked if I wanted to speak. I did. I told the truth, which is not the same as telling everything. I said my father taught me to tie my shoes tight, to wash a car in straight lines, to say sorry when sorry was due. I said he taught me that being stubborn isn't a flaw if you're stubborn about love. My mother cried through the whole service. I sat beside her and handed her tissues until the box was empty. We walked out together into cold air that made our breath look like smoke leaving a house that didn't burn down. I visited her the next week and found her in her chair in a robe, hair unbrushed, the remote control lying on the floor. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother without armor. I don't know what to do, she said. You make tea, I said. You call Ruth. You let me change the light bulbs. You forgive yourself for needing help. I don't deserve it, she whispered. Neither do most of us when we need it, I said. That's what makes it help. We did not become a storybook. We became something I trust more. Two people who learned to speak accurately instead of loudly. On my second anniversary with Gregory, we danced in the kitchen to a song we didn't know in a language we couldn't name. The curtains made from my wedding sleeves fluttered in the evening air. We stepped on each other's toes and laughed and kept going. The phone rang. My daughter inviting us to her house for stew. My son asking if I had a lemon bar recipe like Grandpa liked. A woman from the fund leaving a message that said only, I did it. I told them no. I turned to Gregory and said, if joy had a sound, it would be that message. He kissed my forehead and said, if joy had a face, it would be yours when you decided to answer yourself. I think about the word disgrace sometimes, the way a single syllable can try to flatten a person. I think about the word turn, too, the way you can choose it. Turn of events, turn of the cheek, turn of the key in a lock you changed yourself. The day my parents called my wedding a disgrace, they did not expect the turn of events that followed. A courtroom that believed me, a son who came home to himself, a mother who learned to sit without a script, a life that bloomed out of season because I dared to water it. If there is a lesson in my story, it is not that revenge tastes sweet. It is that justice can taste like warm soup and a clean ledger and the sound of your own name said with kindness after too long without it. It is that a woman can be 70 and still be a beginning. And if I could go back to that church hall on the morning of my wedding, when my mother stood in the doorway with that word like a stone in her mouth, I would tell her what I now know with my whole heart. You can call it a disgrace. I will call it my life, and I will live it.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.